Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Trend Report. I'm glad you're here today for this episode and this conversation, which is another installment of our CEO Chat series. I'm excited to welcome today Byron Leclair with fluidconcepts. How are you, Byron?
I'm great, Sid.
I really appreciate you joining me and having the opportunity to chat with you for a few minutes. So before we dive into our conversation, please tell our listeners who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm the president and founder of fluidconcepts, and we are a office furniture interior products manufacturer located in just north of Toronto, Canada, and have been in business for about 20 years doing this.
Well, first off, congratulations on 20 years in business. That's really exciting. So, Byron, what was like the catalyst that made you decide to start fluidconcepts?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it was, my love and desire for product design and in this industry in particular. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, always wanted to do something on my own. And working in the industry for about 10 years before starting this business, I just knew that this was kind of the direction I wanted to head in. So it really was more of a passion for product design, doing something different, and really sort of carving my own path.
That's great. And so how long had you worked in the industry before you started fluidconcepts?
So about 10 years.
Okay.
So I started in the industry working for a company called Technion, which I think a lot of people are aware of. And they're actually not too far down the road. They're about 5 miles down the road from where we are today. And I started there essentially working as a technical illustrator for them. I came out of school as an industrial designer and had an opportunity to get into this business. Graduated in 92, not a lot of opportunities in 92. It was pretty tough sledding, and found this opportunity and really just kind of worked my way through the organization into design and then into marketing.
That's great. So tell me, industrial design to CEO of a furniture manufacturer. When you started out into school and you got that degree in industrial design, what did you actually think? What was your goal, your career goal? What did you really want to do?
Yeah, when you go through design school, I mean, it's a very broad perspective and you're touching on a lot of different things. I was always interested in doing something in the healthcare field. So when I went through school and my thesis fourth year project essentially designed an adaptive device for people with disabilities. And I kind of wanted to go in that direction. And so what it was essentially an apparatus for quadriplegics and paraplegics that allowed them to essentially adapt different components to an apparatus to their hands so they could essentially work out. They could use regular workout equipment and whatnot. And that's kind of where I wanted to go. And I was really trying to get into that field. And how furniture came into that, I really don't know, because they're pretty much polar opposites. But I was kind of a workout junkie at the time, and I still love to do it. And I just wanted to sort of combine those passions.
So I think your story is a little bit similar to a lot of other people in our industry. We just kind of fall into it because there's no setup at college career day that says, hey, come work in this industry and look at all these opportunities. It's just we fall into it by accident. In your case, you came in through the engineering side of it, or in my case, I came in through the dealer side and sales of it. But it's really fascinating, I think, to hear all the different ways people actually fall into our industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit before we move on, tell us a little bit about fluidconcepts and what you guys do and the types of products that you manufacture.
Sure. Well, fluidconcepts, the whole point of fluidconcepts, the name, it doesn't sound like a furniture company. And that was the point of it. So when we started, me and a partner in the business, we started out this little powder coat facility in Mississauga, which is just a city adjacent to Toronto. And we were I was actually working after I left Technion. I was working in the medical field, believe it or not. And I realized that this wasn't, kind of what I wanted to do. Left Technion and said, just let's do something different, and got into that. And a friend of mine approached me and he said, we're a powder coat manufacturer. We do metal, we do wood. We would like to hire you as a freelancer to basically design some table products for us. So I kind of started with that and essentially was doing some freelance work for them. And after about 6 months of doing it, I just said, you know what, I really, not happy doing what I'm doing. do you want to start a business? And so through my experience with Technion and whatnot, I had a great opportunity to work with a lot of their European companies and bringing products over from Europe, and really got a chance to see. I went to Orgatech a few times and got to see how European products were being designed and how they were slowly moving into North America. So what I tried to do, essentially come out of Fluid Concepts, was really, hey, I've got a design experience, I've got design expertise. We've got manufacturing capability, and we have lots of connections. Why don't we essentially become a mill worker of office furniture? Let's call in architects and designers and really do what they want to do. These guys love to put their mark on projects. So we started off basically doing that. We really didn't have any price books or price guides or anything like that. And we really started calling in architects and designers. And it was the back of the napkin kind of approach. And that's what kicked Fluid Concepts off.
That's awesome. What a great story. Ask a friend, you want to start a business. I mean, I think I love the way that businesses evolve and businesses develop. So what do you actually manufacture today? You talked a little bit about the origin and how you got started. So I know you do laminate case goods. What else do you do?
Yeah, we do laminate case goods. We actually do probably open plan workstations are probably the core of our business. But we do it a little differently. We're not a panel systems company. We don't have a panel system. So essentially, most of our products that we design and manufacture are essentially open plan workstation benching systems. We have a curvilinear system that's unique in the market that we do. So, but we always try to do unique things that are in the market. We're not out there, and I'm never out there to sort of copy somebody else and say, okay, we're just going to do exactly what we do. We try to add a lot of design value and creativity through our process. And I think that's where we add value through our dealer community and through our independent rep community.
So you mentioned earlier that you went to Orgatech and you got to see kind of the designs that are there, how European products are manufactured. Do you have any products today in your catalog that are similar to that? Like you have a European flair to them, or maybe manufactured in some of those same processes?
Yeah, like our post and beam process products are similar in a lot of ways, where they're lightweight. There's lots of light emitting materials within the products. They're really flexible, where they can accept, really any material that's 1/8 inch to 3/4 of an inch.
Okay.
So that's still part of the process where at the end of the day, when we design a project, and it's not that we're there with the end user, walking around the space, but we want to work with dealers who work with companies where vision, creativity, and there is something different about their space. And that's the whole reason they've chosen us to work with. And what I saw within European companies when I was there, this is going back probably 20, 25 years initially, there is that simplicity, there is that elegance. And that's really something that we try to come through with the products that we design and put out to market.
So that's great. And I appreciate you kind of sharing that with us. I am curious though, Byron, why do you think European design products are so popular in North America? Because they really are. We see a lot of European companies coming over. We see a lot of North American manufacturers adopting design styles from Europe. Why do you think they're so popular here?
I think it's the simplicity of them, the elegance and the simplicity of the products. Designers in Europe have always cared about the details. Okay, so if a screw had to be put on a product, they wouldn't take a typical Phillips screw or Robertson screw and put on it. They would design a screw that was elegant, that when you looked at it, you went, that really fits. And as an industrial designer by trade, it's all about the details at the end of the day. I mean, I had a teacher that used to say, God is in the details, and we've all heard that, but he said this all the time. When you're a designer, God is in the details, and you have to look at that level.
Okay, so I have to know something about that. How does your team feel about you being that detailed oriented?
Sometimes they hate it, because they'll, hey, what about this, Byron? They'll come forth. I have a few designers or a number of designers on staff, and there's a certain level where you have to go. You can't refine something because you'll just be in that sort of refining aspect forever. So there's a certain element where you got to go, okay, this is it. We're gonna go. You could continue to make it, more refined. But yes, sometimes they are like, it's good enough. They're going to buy it anyway. And I'm going, well, I don't like it. It's not good enough for me. Right.
Oh my gosh. I can only imagine being stuck between pleasing the industrial designer, CEO, and the customer on the other end with all the little details. So that's really fantastic. Now you mentioned customization early on in the beginning of our conversation. Do you do a lot of customization today?
We do a lot of customization, but it is a bit of a, let's say, a scary word, because a lot of people, when they hear customization, they think, this is going to be extremely long lead time. It's going to be, triple in price. And what we've done with our products and our processes is that they are easily, call it malleable, and you can call it customizable. But the nature of our components are, we use a lot of different aluminum extrusions and different types of flat material that we bring into our plant into 16 and 20-foot lengths. So cutting something down at 48 inches to 44.5 inches because somebody wants it at that height is a really easy thing to do for us, and it's just part of our process. So anybody in the manufacturing business in our world realizes that yield is the number one thing. So it really comes down to, hey, how many pieces can we get out of this length? Of course, and that really what drives the price. It's not a rocket science industry. It comes down to economics, but we've developed a process in our products that our designers essentially use and can do a lot of these different things. So we can still do things that are kind of back of the napkin, or we can do simple modifications where somebody's looking for something at a very specific height, a width, a depth, a curve, a material that we can integrate very easily without being at that sort of customized time and price.
Well, having worked for multiple manufacturers, I understand everything that you just said. And I sometimes wonder if the dealer community and even the specifier / interior design community actually understand so much of what you said, specifically around yield. It's easy to customize things, as you described, going from 48 inches to 44.5 inches tall. That's an actual easy process. But what drives it is the yield that you can get out of the raw material and the maximization of that raw material, because there's two sides of this, right? There's the side of using as much of the material and generating as less waste as we possibly can, but also then supporting what it is the customer needs. Because if we waste too much product, then we're classified as not being as sustainable as we need to be. But then on the other side, when the price goes up, so it's a balancing act that I think is really important to talk about, so that the community understands some of the challenges that you go through when you get that request to change this height or to change this width.
Absolutely, yes. And we train our designers to sort of talk that talk. So, when our designers are talking to whether a dealer or somebody in the A&D community, somebody may ask for something that they don't know what they're asking for. They just know this is what they want. We'll go back to them and say, we can do that. However, there's going to be an increase in price of this because of this reason. Sometimes they'll go, I don't care, just do it anyway because it's what I want. Other times you may go, here's an alternative. Hey, if we increase something by this size or this dimension, we can actually bring down the cost another 15%. Okay.
Right.
So there's that whole value engineering people have used this value engineering process. It's not really value engineering, but it's letting people understand some intricacies of our business. And when you let them understand that, you can have a different dialogue on how you get to the end solution. It is a bit of a compromise. And at the end of the day, if a client says, this is what I want because this is what I want, we'll do it. Yeah. Right. But we'll explain why.
Well, there's so many different aspects of this that I think are really fascinating. Like, for example, if somebody said, I want a custom laminate on something, well, there may or may not be, depending on the laminate that was requested, the supplier that it comes from, there may or may not be minimums. And let's just say, for example, what they wanted took one piece of laminate, but you have to buy 5 pieces. Well, you're charging them for the 5 pieces of laminate that you had to buy as the minimum for the one piece that's being used. And I think that's part of the manufacturing process that's not truly explained to the people on the front end requesting, especially the design community requesting this custom finish or this custom detail. It's a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely. We often get requests, we'll paint our products in whatever colors they're looking for. We've got standard colors, but somebody will come in with this purple because that's their company. Their company logo's got purple on it, and they want this exact Pantone finish color. And we'll say, yeah, no problem. However, you want one piece, we've got to buy a whole box of powder to do this. And we can get most of the box used for what you're looking for. But if you have an add-on product and you want one more, it's going to be a cost of an extra box of powder again. and we'll say, this is what it's going to be. So, and you have those conversations. At the end of the day, they may want what they want, or they may go, well, what else do you have in purple? Right.
The reason I'm smiling and laughing, if you're watching on YouTube, you saw me smiling and laughing at that because I've had that exact conversation with people that want a custom paint and don't realize you got to buy a box and how many pounds of powder in a box and that one extra piece, you need that one add-on for that one whatever pedestal that you got to paint in purple again, you got to buy a whole nother box of powder. So it's a really fascinating conversation. I'm sorry we went down a rabbit hole there.
Yeah, yeah. Another example is that we have lots, we don't, throw away a lot of our offcuts and whatnot. So what we do is, for instance, resin-based materials, like 3form and Lumicore. We do a lot of reception stations as well. There's some really creative reception stations, and a client may come in and say, well, I want this specific 3form material in here. We'll go into our remnants area and we'll say, you know what, we got to buy a whole sheet of this, and that product is not inexpensive, but we've got this offcut that we can offer you, for really inexpensive, because it's sitting here in our factory, and they're more often than not saying, yeah, that's great, I'll compromise. However, there's other ones that just go, just give me what I want.
Yep. Yep. Well, I think it's great that you're keeping them and that you are trying to repurpose them in other applications rather than just throwing them away. So you're saving a product going to the landfill, which is actually a really good thing.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
So I am curious as we get off this manufacturing talk because because I worked for factories for so long, I could talk about this stuff for quite a while. Tell us and tell our listeners, Byron, what really separates or distinguishes Fluid Concepts from the rest of the crowd? Tell us what your value prop is, why
Sure.
people should work with you.
The elevator pitch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
putting you on the spot.
Yeah. So I think the things that differentiate us is that we're not a large company. We're a small, nimble organization. And what we do is I think the value add is through our design process. So we've got price and product guides like everybody else. We also have about 3,000 to 4,000 different product ideas on our website, for instance. And what we are our goal is to provide somebody with lots of different options with what they look for. For instance, we've got this one large product map of 120 different workstation ideas, of different types of ideas. And we're saying these are just starting points. Certainly they're already designed and they're already, they're already quoted. And if you want that exactly, yes, we can do that. But where I think we shine is that our design group and our customer service group work directly with the dealer community to add that sort of design and manufacturing value, so they can differentiate, our dealers can differentiate themselves in the marketplace. So really, that's, I think, the number one biggest value add, is our design support.
That's great. And it, providing support to the dealer community and then to the support to their customer community, meaning the end user, is really important because we've seen it. Everybody's getting pinched. Everybody's being asked to do more and more with less resources and less people, which kind of brings me to a point. Let's talk for just a minute from a leadership position. How has what's happened in the last almost 24 months impacted your organization first, and then your thoughts on how it's impacted our industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all kind of wondering where things are headed. I mean, things are starting to settle out right now as we see them. But again, we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know what the next 12 months are going to look like. So when COVID hit back in March, essentially, we were shut down like everybody else, and we shut down the company for 2 weeks. Okay. And I came in the office every day and I said, okay, what are we going to do? Because we all knew that furniture was going to drop off like a stone for, we all thought for the next 5 years. Okay. I mean, the sky was falling. So, we really just, I looked at it and I said, okay, what can we do? And what is the need going to be? So we quickly pivoted, and you hear that word a lot, but we adapted, and we've been doing, screens and space dividers as part of our products for a number of years. But we realized, hey, what are the other kinds of products that are going to go out there? So we quickly came out in the market with a number of different screen-based products, and really went hard, got our whole independent rep community behind us, and promoted really out of the gates. It worked out really well. We did tremendously well through COVID because of that. Our furniture sales dropped off by 80, 85%, but our screen sales in our business soared by 300%.
Sure.
So we did really well. There's a lot of other companies I think that have a similar story to us. And again, it becomes about survivalship. And as a leader, what are you going to do to, keep your business and your going concern moving forward and supporting all the staff that essentially, that are so important to our business, and not just us, but our independent reps and our dealers and everybody else. And we've got a lot of accolades to say, hey, I'm glad what you did because you really kept us going through COVID, and which was great. So number one is seeing the writing on the wall, being a visionary, being able to adapt quick is key. And you can adapt quick, when you need to, and you need to go slow when you need to. And I think that a leader understands those different dynamics in the market and needs to adjust, but also needs to communicate, because your staff and your employees are always 3 steps behind you. So I really tried to be, communicate daily. Here's where we are. Here's where we're going. We slowly brought staff back, and we now we're bigger than we were before COVID, which is great. So
that's awesome, and I appreciate you sharing that. And you're right. I think everybody in our industry went through that kind of peaks and valleys with it. Sounds like you had the courage to have some really good vision about what you needed to do and where you needed to go. But one more question to follow up to this, which is, what do you think the top 3 things that as a leader, as a CEO, that you learned through the last 24 months that will carry you through the next 10 years? Like, what are those 3 big takeaways or 3 big learnings?
Right. Number one, I mentioned communication, and again, it's always been, I keep a lot in my head, and I really got sort of out of my comfort zone when COVID hit, about communicating, and that's kind of one thing that stuck, is that, people think that, well, I've already told you that, but the reality is that you need to tell somebody 3 or 4 times before it really sticks. Is communicate, repetition, repetition, repetition. So that's something that I'm really trying to take forward and be a much better communicator through our organization and to support our employees. Another thing I learned is don't be afraid to, take risks or calculated risks. So we've been a company that, like I said, 20 years, we've been growing kind of organically through 20 years, and being basically, there has been no big steep, meteoric rises, and there's been no big, meteoric sort of drops. But in terms of taking some risks out there and communicating those is an important thing. So number 3, I don't know, it's, giving confidence that you know what you're doing. Even though you may not think you were doing out there. And that comes through communication, is just having confidence and instilling that confidence through the organization. So everybody is sort of running along the same, down the same path.
So I'm going to reframe those just a little bit for you. That's the coach in me coming out. Okay.
Yeah.
Byron.
Okay.
That's the coach in me coming out, but I want to reframe those. You said 3 things that I think are really important. Communicate, over communicate with your team, especially in a time of crisis. Very important, because they need to hear from you. They need to know that things are going to be okay. They need to know what's happening so that they're not left in the dark. That is critical. The second thing you said is have the courage to take risk. Have the courage to take the risk, evaluate the risk, make sure I think your word was calculated, the calculated risk. And I think that's really important, is to be able to understand the risk you're taking, but also have the courage to do it. You also said something else about communication, that it was way outside your comfort zone. And, the coach in me will also say that's when real growth happens, is when we step outside of our comfort zone. Right.
Absolutely.
And then the third thing that you said, and I wrote it down a little bit differently, was to believe in what you're doing, have the confidence to continue forward. And as you're communicating that, if you believe, they believe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you
And
believe,
where
they believe.
Yeah. And thank you for doing that, Sid, because I kind of waffled on that third there.
You're fine.
But a lot of companies have this and develop core values for their business, right? There's 3 to 5 core values that went through this exercise about 2 years ago. And when I come back to it and I go, you can put these things on your wall and you go, these are all great things and they're great buzzwords and whatnot. But when I come back to it, I go, this is really what drives the business forward, and believing in your core values. And if you stick with those things, they will hold true for you through the rest. And I'm really now really talking to a lot of our staff about the core values, bringing them up in meetings. They are on our wall, but I go through them and I go, guys, this is really what it's all about.
Absolutely. Do you mind sharing what your core values are?
Sure. Is honesty with integrity. I may not have them all here. They're on our website too, but honesty with integrity. There's diversity. There's trust, hard work. We have one more, which is innovation.
That's great. Those are great. I love them. And I love that you have them on the wall. They're outside in your factory where people can see them. And I think core values are really, really important. So I have a question for you. And I was looking for something while you were talking because it's right at the top of my brain and I can't even think of the name of it now. But do you know who Ernest Shackleton is?
I've heard the name, but no, I can't place him.
Shackleton is an explorer that died in 1922, I believe. And he is a British explorer that multiple attempts to go to Antarctica. And first attempt was to be the first man to ever go to Antarctica. And then he tried to cross it. And I think it was 3 or 4 different times. And he's my favorite character in history. I mean, and I only met him recently. And that's why I'm actually looking for this article that I wrote for the Business of Furniture magazine. And I literally cannot find it. But Shackleton, every attempt that he went, he failed. He never made it. And the last time he went, he died at St. George's Island trying to get back. But the lesson from Shackleton that I think is so important for leaders is that every time he raised his hand and said, I'm going back to try the impossible, every person that was still alive raised their hand and went with him. And that is such a powerful lesson. And there's a whole list of things that can be learned from Shackleton. And actually, the article that I just read it a few minutes ago too, Byron. I can't believe I can't find it. But it was Dr. Nancy Cohen, who is a professor from Harvard University, wrote a book about him. And she spoke at the BIFMA 360 conference in January of 2020. And I got to hear her speak, and I have the book. The book is called Forged in Crisis. And as I listened to her talk about Shackleton, I became enamored with what someone from 100 years ago could teach leaders today about leading companies and about leading people. I think is pretty impressive. If you're a frequent listener to the podcast, you've probably heard me talk about Shackleton before because I am enamored by him. But as you were talking, especially the believe part, because people believed in Shackleton. And because he communicated with them and he stood up and he said what was going on. And some of the things that you talked about there are very much in line with him. So I'll drop the link to the book in the show notes, but just kind of a little off the topic soapbox there thing, but he's very fascinating. You just Google him too, and there'll be dozens of YouTube videos come up about him. But I like to talk about him, and I'm going to find the article. And when I do find the article, for those of you listening, I'm going to post it in the show notes so that you can read it because it's a really good article about leadership. So, Byron, we've got just a few minutes left, and I would really like to get your thoughts about 2 additional things. First, what do you believe is the impact to those of us in our industry? What's the impact of the hybrid work model to the industry?
I think the number one thing is that we need to all think differently about how we can be important to that model. People are still working, people are at home. I'm at home right now working, and they're still sitting at desks, they're still sitting at furniture, they're doing all of that. I firmly believe that people will come back to the workplace, but I believe the work from home balance is going to stay. Okay. People have sort of had that flavor of working at home, seen the benefits of it, but I think they're also missing the benefits at work. And I think as we get through over the next year, things are going to be coming back. However, how people plan in spaces are going to be different. The nature of, the 24 by 48 inch benching style workspace, I think is at least going to go away for the next 5 years, where people are not going to plan that way. If they do have that and they don't want to invest in furniture, we know that people are going to be positioned alternate to each other, staggered in spaces. So one of the things that, we've been trying to do, and we do a lot of brainstorming about this, is that, okay, how are people going to be planning in new workspaces? And we realize that offset planning is going to be important. And one of our products that we do a curvilinear Carol, which is kind of unique in the industry. And it's amazing in the last 6 to 8 months how that product has bumped up in terms of what we're quoting and what we're producing, because it's how people are now starting to see this offset planning. The number two is how you transact, right? The dealer model in terms of our dealer support is so important in the industry, so important to us. However, how are dealers reacting to getting more involved in the e-commerce side of the business, whether they're doing it themselves, or how do manufacturers support them in terms of giving them portals to have product, flow right back down to the end user. So I think there's a lot in the e-commerce side. We see a lot of the big companies out there have got their own e-commerce stores. Of course, they're selling mostly home office product, but how do we get past just the home office product and get that model put into more contract-based furnishings? So those are the kind of things that we need to think about, and how we're going to work together to really solve these kind of issues as we move forward.
So that is what I would call vision again. Looking at what's happening around us, what's happening with our customers, what's happening in the world, and trying to vision through what is it that we need to do and how do we need to change and adapt in order to support the customers. In your case, the dealer customer, but in their case, the end user customer, because we do have to change and adapt. And I think it's really important that we be thinking about these things, because we can't sit stagnant while the world around us changes. Because if
Absolutely.
we do, we're going to be left behind. And I think that is so very important. We have to be thinking, we have to be doing, you used one of my favorite terms, brainstorming. We have to be brainstorming ideas, and we have to be embracing digital sales strategies. And that's more than just e-commerce. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the episodes. I had 2 episodes back to back about digital sales strategies, because it's important. We need digital sales strategies, and that's not just an e-commerce store in order to attract customers to us, because I've said this multiple times. So if you've listened, you're probably tired of me saying this as a broken record, but I do believe that the emergence of the hybrid work model is the greatest challenge our industry has ever faced, but also poses the greatest opportunity that our industry will have in probably the last 8 to 10 years, because it's an opportunity for us to create new products, to do new things, to develop new software, new services, whatever it is. It's our opportunity to create big, bold moves. And that's why I think it's so important.
I agree with you 100%.
So I have one final question for you. And that really question is about, as you look at our industry, and what you probably see, a lot of what I see is our industry is getting older. Dealership owners are getting older. Manufacturers are the same way. And we have a really, really hard time in bringing new people into our industry. What would you say to young people out there that might discover our podcast, might discover the CEO chat, about why they would want to come into the office furniture industry? What would you say to say, hey, come check us out and see what we do? What kind of inspiration would you give to them?
Right. I would say that it's probably the most varied kind of industry you can be in. And there's elements, it's not just, there's a manufacturing element or distribution aspect of it. There's the economics of it. There is the design element of it. I mean, personally, I've been in it, and like you said, once you get into this industry, it's very hard to leave. Most people don't leave because they can't, or they try and they come back. So, but I'd say that, and technology, what we just talked about, right? How can the young people be important, especially on the technological front, and how we move this forward, right? So we've got an older industry. So how can they be important in terms of helping us look at it in different ways, with different eyes, and get involved with it? It's a relationship business at the end of the day, but relationships in terms of how you communicate are changing now. So, and the young people are the best ones to do it, because they've adapted. That's all they know, right? So it's not just social media, even though they live on social media, and that's integrated into what we do. And we're kind of laggards in that, but we're getting there. So I think for a lot of those reasons, if I've ever talking, and I actually go out to and talk to students occasionally on this, and usually just about business and design and whatnot. But when I get to talk about our industry, I'm very passionate about it. And I think that comes through, and I get a lot of, bright eyes and say, that seems like a pretty interesting direction.
Well, it's important to remember that the young people that you were just talking about are going to be the customers in the very near future. And we have to pay really close attention to how they behave today because they're going to be the buyers in the really near future. In fact, some of the millennials are already in that buying position. And most of the leaders inside of our industry are part of the last generation to not grow up with a phone in their hand. Think about that for a second. We didn't grow up that way. And we
Yeah.
might have had a play phone, but we certainly did not have a digital device when we were 8 years old in our hands. The people that are coming up into the workforce in a big way and people that are emerging as decision makers in a big way have only ever had a device in their hand. And
Yeah.
we have to think about what that means to the impact to us, as you said, making decision making easier, simpler, and smarter at this, at literally as a touch. It's something we all have to think about. But I appreciate the inspiration that you're sharing because we do need young people in our industry. I talk to people about it all the time because it is fun, it's exciting, it's invigorating, and you don't get to do the same thing twice. It's not repetitive, right? It's we get to create dynamic spaces, and I think that's really important. And I would say to anybody that if you're somewhat creative and you're listening to this, come check us out. Come check the industry out because it's a lot of fun. And there are so many different options and places to work inside of our industry that, I mean, it's a lengthy list of opportunities.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Byron, I really appreciate you joining me today for the Trend Report and for this CEO chat, the last one of the year. You're wrapping up 2021 for us with our CEO chat series. If our community would like to get in touch with you or connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Sure. They can reach out to me via email, which is byron@fluidgroup.com, or get to our website and call directly and ask speak to me. I'm open to speak to anybody. Love the industry, and I'm here to support in any way I can.
Well, thank you for that. We'll be sure to drop your website link in the show notes as well as your email address in the show notes for all of you. If you do reach out to him, please let him know you heard him here on the Trend Report, and that's why you're reaching out. Again, thank you very much, Byron, for joining me today. I appreciate it, and I'm wishing all of you a fantastic 2022.
Great. Thanks very much, Sid.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Go out there and make today great, and we'll see you again next week.